Let me ask you something. How many times today did you think about your children? Not a quick passing thought. I mean, really think about them. Wonder how they're doing. Wonder if they're happy. Wonder if they're eating well, sleeping enough, handling their stress. If the answer is more than once, you're not alone. And you're not unusual. You're just a parent. I've been a practicing psychologist for over 40 years. Across those 4 decades, I've sat across from thousands of people, parents, adult children, grandparents, families in every shape and size. I've heard confessions in my office that people have never spoken out loud before. And I've noticed something that I want to share with you today. The happiest parents I've ever worked with, the ones in their 70s, 80s, even their 90s who carry a genuine peace in their eyes, they all have something in common. It's not money. It's not perfect health. It's not even a perfect family. It's what they choose not to say. Now I want to be very clear about something before we go any further. This video is not about lying to your children. It's not about hiding or pretending. What I'm describing is something far more powerful. It's emotional maturity, the kind you can only develop after decades of loving someone. It's the wisdom to know that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is hold certain words inside. Not because they aren't true, but because saying them would serve you more than it would serve them. That's a hard thing to learn. And the parents who learn it, they tend to be the happiest ones I've ever met. So today, we're going to walk through 6 things the happiest parents over 70 never tell their adult children. If you're a parent, I think you'll recognize yourself in at least a few of these. And if you're watching this as an adult son or daughter, what you hear today might just change how you understand your mom or dad forever. Before we get started, if this channel has ever given you something to think about, hit that subscribe button. You're part of a community here at Strong Elderly Life. People who believe that getting older doesn't mean getting quieter. It means getting wiser. Let's begin. Number 1. I'm disappointed in some of your choices. Here's a truth no parenting book prepares you for. Your child will grow up and make decisions you disagree with. Maybe they chose a career that doesn't make sense to you. Maybe they married someone you had reservations about. Maybe they moved across the country, or across the world, and you still haven't fully made peace with that distance. Maybe it's how they raise your grandchildren. Maybe it's something you can't even put into words, just a quiet feeling that the life they built isn't the life you imagined for them. Every parent feels this at some point. Every single one. If someone tells you they've never been disappointed by a choice their child made, they're either not being honest or they haven't been paying attention. But here's what separates the happiest parents from the rest. They feel the disappointment, and they let it stay inside. Not because they're weak, because they're wise. They've learned, often the hard way, that voicing disappointment to an adult child almost never changes the decision. What it does change is the relationship. A single sentence, "I just thought you'd do something more with your life," can echo in your child's mind for decades. Not because they're fragile, because your voice matters to them more than any other voice on earth. Even now, even at their age. In psychology, we talk about something called radical acceptance. It doesn't mean you approve of everything. It means you stop fighting reality. Your child made their choice. They're living their life. And the most powerful thing you can do is love them inside that life, not outside it, looking in with judgment. The happiest parents I've known replace spoken disappointment with something much more effective. They show up. They support. They let their presence say what their words never need to. Number 2. I'm lonely sometimes. This one is going to be hard for some of you to hear, because it might be exactly what you're feeling right now. After 70, the world gets smaller. That's not pessimism. That's just reality. Friends pass away. A spouse may be gone. The neighborhood changes. The phone rings less. The days get longer in ways they never used to. And somewhere in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, sitting in a quiet house, you feel it. That weight. That silence that isn't peaceful anymore. It's just empty. Loneliness after 70 is one of the most common experiences I encounter in my practice. And it's one of the least talked about. Because admitting you're lonely feels like admitting you're not enough on your own. And that's simply not true. But here's what the happiest parents do. They feel the loneliness, and they choose very carefully who they share it with. And most of the time, that person is not their adult child. Why? Because they know what happens when you tell your son or daughter, "I'm lonely." Even with the best intentions, it lands as guilt. The child hears, "I'm not visiting enough, I'm not calling enough, I'm failing." And then they start showing up out of obligation. And you know the difference, don't you? You can always tell when someone is there because they want to be, and when they're there because they feel they have to be. The second one doesn't cure loneliness. It deepens it. In psychology, there's an important difference between emotional sharing and emotional burdening. Sharing is when you open up to someone who can hold your feelings alongside you, a friend, a counselor, a support group, someone in your season of life. Burdening is when you place your feelings on someone who can't fix the problem without sacrificing something else, their time, their peace, their own family balance. The happiest parents build a support system that doesn't depend entirely on their children. They join communities. They stay connected with peers. They find a good therapist. And yes, therapy at 70 or 80 is not only normal, it's one of the bravest things you can do. They don't hide their loneliness. They just choose the right audience for it. And that, my friend, is not weakness. That is protection of the people they love most. Number 3. I worry about your finances, your marriage, or your parenting. Let me tell you something. The moment your child was born, a worry switch flipped on inside your brain. And that switch, it never turns off. Not when they're 10, not when they're 30, not when they're 55. You will worry about your children until the very last breath you take on this earth. And after 70, the worry can actually get worse. Because now you're watching from a distance. You see your daughter stressed about money, but you can't fix it. You see your son's marriage struggling and your hands are tied. You see your grandchildren being raised in ways that make you cringe. Too much screen time, not enough structure, things you would have done differently. And every bone in your body wants to say something. But the happiest parents don't. They've learned a lesson that took decades to arrive. Unsolicited advice, no matter how loving the intention, almost always sounds like criticism to the person receiving it. That's not a guess. That's backed by research. Studies on intergenerational family dynamics consistently show that the strongest relationships between aging parents and adult children are the ones with clear, respected boundaries. The parent who says, "Have you thought about spending less?" is not heard as helpful. They're heard as, "I don't trust you to manage your own life." So what do the happiest parents do instead? They wait. They bite their tongue. And they make themselves available. There's a phrase I share with my clients. If they want my advice, they'll ask. That's not indifference. That's respect. It tells your adult child, "I believe in your ability to handle your life. I trust you. And when you need me, I'm right here." That posture, available, not intrusive, is one of the most powerful things a parent over 70 can offer. It keeps the door open instead of slamming it shut. Number 4. I'm scared about my health. After 70, every doctor's appointment carries a different weight. Every new ache makes you pause. Every moment where you forget a name or lose a word mid-sentence, it sends a cold ripple through your chest. Is this normal? Or is this the beginning of something I can't control? The fear is real. And it doesn't need to be dramatic to be present. It can be as quiet as lying awake at 3 a.m., wondering about a test result, or standing in the shower and noticing that your balance isn't what it was a year ago, or reading about a friend's diagnosis and thinking, "Am I next?" The happiest parents carry this fear, but they carry it carefully. They don't unload it on their children every time they feel a twinge, not because they're pretending to be invincible, but because they understand something important about how their children see them. To your adult child, you are still their parent. You are still the person who made them feel safe. And when you constantly share your health fears, every ache, every worry, every "I think something's wrong," you slowly change the dynamic. You stop being their parent and start becoming their patient. And once that shift happens, it's very hard to undo. In psychology, we call this protective buffering. It's a strategy where one person in a relationship deliberately shields the other from their own distress, not to deceive, but to preserve the quality of the bond. Research shows that older adults who practice moderate protective buffering tend to have higher relationship satisfaction with their adult children. Now, let me be clear about something. I'm not saying you should hide a serious diagnosis. There are things your children need to know. Your medical directives, your legal documents, your wishes for care. That's practical. That's responsible. That's a conversation every family should have. But the daily fear, the 3 a.m. worry, the quiet terror of losing your independence, that's where the happiest parents draw the line. They process those feelings with a friend, a counselor, a faith community, someone who can hold the fear without being crushed by it. They want their children to remember them as strong, not as a list of symptoms. And honestly, that's one of the most dignified choices a person can make. Number 5. I sometimes feel like a burden. If I had to name the single most common unspoken feeling among parents over 70, this is it. Bar none. The feeling of being a burden doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in. Maybe it started when you needed help carrying groceries, or when you had to ask someone to drive you to a doctor's appointment, or when you noticed your child rearranging their entire weekend to check in on you. Little by little, the scale tips. You used to be the giver, the provider, the protector, the one everyone leaned on. Now you find yourself on the other side, needing, depending, asking, and it doesn't feel right. It feels like you're taking up space in lives that are already full. The happiest parents feel this deeply, but they don't say it out loud to their children because they've learned something that took them years to understand. When you tell your child, "I feel like a burden," they will immediately say, "No, you're not." And they'll mean it. But that reassurance doesn't fix the feeling. It just makes the conversation awkward and leaves both of you feeling worse. Your child feels guilty for not doing enough. You feel guilty for bringing it up. Nobody wins. In psychology, we call this perceived burdensomeness. And it's one of the most serious emotional challenges in later life. It can erode your sense of self-worth. It can lead to withdrawal. In severe cases, it can even contribute to depression. But here's the key. The happiest parents don't let that feeling define them. Instead, they find new ways to contribute. They volunteer. They share their stories. They mentor younger people. They help with grandchildren, not because they have to, but because it reminds them that they still have something to give. They fight the feeling with action, not with confession. And in doing so, they rebuild their sense of purpose from the inside out. So if you're watching this and that feeling lives inside you, I want you to hear me clearly. You are not a burden. Your presence in this family is not a debt. It's a gift. A gift your children may not always express, but one they will carry with them long after you're gone. The feeling you're having is normal. It's human. But it does not define your worth. Not even close. Number 6. I wish we had more time together. This is the last one. And for me, it's the most beautiful. After 70, you start counting. Not in a morbid way. Not with dread. But with a quiet awareness that you didn't have at 40 or 50. You notice things. You notice that your son visits twice a year. And you think, if I have 10 good years left, that's 20 more visits. You watch your grandchild blow out birthday candles and a small voice in the back of your mind whispers, "How many more of these will I see?" This isn't sadness. It's clarity. It's the kind of awareness that only comes when you've lived long enough to understand that time is the only thing you can't earn back. And the happiest parents? They feel this every single day. But they never say it. Because they know that if they did, if they said, "I wish we had more time," It would change the color of every moment they share with their children. It would turn every visit into a goodbye, every phone call into a last call, every hug into something heavy. And they don't want that. They want their children to enjoy the time they spend together, not mourn it while it's still happening. There's a psychologist at Stanford named Laura Carstensen who developed something called socio-emotional selectivity theory. And what her research shows is this: when people become aware that their time is limited, they don't become desperate. They become selective. They stop chasing quantity and start protecting quality. They focus on the people and moments that matter most. They choose depth over breadth, meaning over motion. That's exactly what the happiest parents do. They don't say, "I wish we had more time." Instead, after a visit, they say something like, "I had a wonderful time today." They turn what could be longing into gratitude. They turn what could be grief into grace. And if you can do that, if you can sit at your kitchen table after your child leaves, and instead of thinking, "When will I see them again?" you think, "What a beautiful afternoon that was," then you have unlocked something that most people never find. You have learned to love the moment you're in. And that, right there, is the secret the happiest parents carry. So let's bring this all together. 6 things. 6 truths that live in the hearts of the happiest parents over 70. Not lies. Not secrets. Just things they've learned to hold. Gently. Quietly. With love. So that their children can live freely. I'm disappointed in some of your choices. Held. I'm lonely sometimes. Held. I worry about your life. Held. I'm scared about my health. Held. I feel like a burden. Held. I wish we had more time. Held. All held. All carried. All borne by hands that have been holding things for other people for as long as they can remember. If you're a parent watching this, and you recognized yourself in even one of those 6 things, I want you to know something. What you're doing is not small. It's not easy. And it is certainly not weakness. What you're doing is one of the hardest, most selfless forms of love that exists. You're choosing your child's peace over your own comfort. And that is extraordinary. And if you're an adult child who stumbled onto this video, maybe your parent even sent it to you, I have a small request. Call them. Not next week. Today. You don't need a reason. You don't need news. Just call. Just say, "I was thinking about you." You have no idea how much those 5 words can mean to someone who is holding all 6 of those things in silence. That's all for today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this community at Strong Elderly Life. If this video touched something inside you, share it with someone who needs it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is your moment. We put out new videos every week, conversations about aging with strength, with wisdom, and with the kind of honesty that makes life better. I'll leave you with this thought. The happiest parents I've ever known weren't the ones who said the most. They were the ones who loved enough to hold it in, so their children could live freely. Until next time, take care of yourselves. You've earned it.